The room shimmered with golden lights, casting a warm glow over the elegantly dressed guests. Crystal glasses chimed in a soft symphony as laughter floated through the air. A pianist played quietly in the corner, fingers dancing over the keys with effortless grace. It was my birthday, my 41st. I stood near the center of the room, wearing the emerald dress Daniel had insisted I wear. "It makes you look powerful," he had said. I had believed him, as I always did. Daniel raised his glass, his smile wide and polished, the same smile that had built his empire. "Everyone," he said, his voice smooth and commanding, "I'd like a moment of your attention." The room fell silent. I smiled, expecting warmth, gratitude, something akin to love. Instead, a chill swept through my chest. "You all know how much I value honesty," Daniel continued, locking eyes with me. "Especially on important days." My stomach tightened. "This year," he said, "I've realized something important." Guests leaned forward, anticipating a toast, a compliment, a light-hearted joke. "I've outgrown my marriage." A few guests laughed, nervously. Then silence crashed down when it became clear he was serious. "I believe it's time to move forward," he said calmly. Alone, my glass slipped from my fingers, shattering against the marble floor. No one moved. No one spoke. Daniel turned back to the guests. "Please enjoy dessert. Tonight is still a celebration." A celebration of my ending. I didn't cry. Not yet. Shock wrapped around me like ice. People avoided my eyes. Some looked at me with pity, others with curiosity, like I was a scene they didn't want to stare at but couldn't look away from. Daniel leaned close. "Let's not make this ugly," he whispered. "You'll be taken care of. Just exit gracefully." Exit, like I was a problem to be removed. I walked to the bathroom, heels clicking loudly against the floor, each step echoing my humiliation. Inside, I locked the door and stared at my reflection. Mascara perfect, hair flawless, eyes empty. I remembered the nights he doubted himself, the meetings I had prepared him for, the connections I had introduced him to. I remembered the contracts I had reviewed and the negotiations I had quietly managed. I remembered who I was before I became Daniel's wife. For the first time in years, I asked myself, what if this wasn't my ending? I didn't confront him. I didn't scream. I walked back into the party, picked up my purse, and smiled at the guests. "Thank you all for coming," I said calmly. "Enjoy the cake." Daniel watched me, confused. I leaned in and whispered, "You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Then I left. Outside, the night air hit me like a wake-up call. I sat in my car, letting the silence wrap around me. I opened my laptop, accessed old emails, files, and contracts. Daniel had trusted me with everything he thought was small. He forgot one thing: I had been the quiet architect behind his empire. The humiliation transformed into clarity. Those who know how something was built also know how to dismantle it. I didn't act in anger. I acted in precision. The first step of reclaiming myself had begun. The next morning, I woke up to sunlight streaming through the curtains. For the first time in years, I felt no urgency to answer a call, to explain myself, or to smooth over someone else's ego. I made coffee, brewed strong black coffee, and sat by the window watching the city wake. Daniel's message from last night still lingered in my inbox. "We can talk. We can fix this." I didn't reply. Not yet. Instead, I began reviewing the empire he had built, or rather, the empire we had built together. Every contract, every partnership, every deal had my fingerprints on it, though he never credited me. He had always said, "You're so good with details." And he was right. I realized the power he thought was his alone was, in reality, always mine too. Over the next few days, I moved carefully. I consulted quietly with professionals, lawyers, financial advisors, and mentors I had known in secret, people who recognized my skills independently of Daniel. I didn't accuse. I didn't threaten. I asked questions, requested documentation, verified accounts. Every action was calm, methodical, and deliberate. Daniel noticed the shift immediately. Meetings that once ran smoothly under his oversight became stalled. Partners questioned inconsistencies. Investors demanded clarity. Boards requested explanations. "You're overreacting," Daniel said once, his voice tight with anger. "You're being emotional." "I'm being accurate," I replied calmly. The empire that had seemed untouchable began to tremble, not because I attacked it, but because I stopped protecting it. Meanwhile, I rebuilt myself. I started sleeping earlier, exercising not for appearances but for my own energy. I took time to read, to write, to remember the woman I had been before marriage, before years of compromise and invisibility. I began mentoring young women quietly, offering advice about leadership, negotiation, and self-worth. Seeing their confidence grow reminded me of the power I had suppressed for so long. And as weeks turned into months, I felt a freedom I had never known. The birthday that had ended me in public became the catalyst for my reinvention. One afternoon, I received a call from Daniel. His tone was measured, almost pleading. "Can we meet? I think we need to discuss the business." I agreed, but not as the woman he once controlled. I met him with calm authority. My presence alone was enough to make him uncomfortable. He looked at me, trying to recall the years he had dominated, the woman he thought he owned. "I'm not the person you knew," I said. "The company is not yours alone. I've always been part of it. And now, I claim my part." Silence. He swallowed, searching for a counter, a strategy, a weapon I would not give him. The empire shifted. Daniel realized he could not maneuver around me as he once had. Every step he took, I anticipated. Every deal he tried to influence, I verified. By the end of the month, partnerships were restructured. Investors were updated. Key decisions required my approval. And Daniel had no choice but to comply. It wasn't revenge. It was reclaiming what had always been mine. Through this, I learned that power is not only in domination but in quiet mastery, in knowing your own worth and refusing to let anyone diminish it. For the first time, my birthdays were no longer about parties or applause. They were about reflection, growth, and self-possession. The woman Daniel thought he had ended with a toast had returned, stronger, wiser, and unafraid. Months passed, and life began to take a rhythm I had not felt in years. I had reclaimed control, but more importantly, I had reclaimed myself. The empire, once a source of shame and humiliation, now became a mirror reflecting my abilities, my intelligence, my perseverance. I started attending meetings not as Daniel's wife, but as my own person, recognized for my skill and insight. Partners began to respect me directly. Investors listened. Employees sought my advice. I was no longer invisible, I was essential. Daniel tried to assert himself. He attempted subtle manipulations, whispered to partners, tried to rewrite histories, to downplay my role. But I had anticipated everything. I had prepared, documented, and built alliances quietly. "Why are you doing this?" he demanded one afternoon, frustration brimming in his voice. "Because I never stopped building," I replied. "Even when you thought I had no voice, no authority, no presence. I was here." He couldn't argue. He couldn't undo the reality I had quietly reconstructed. Outside the boardrooms and meetings, I was transforming my personal life too. I traveled, reconnecting with friends who had drifted away during years of compromise. I laughed without fear of judgment. I cried without shame. I felt again, fully, completely. Then came the day I realized the ultimate lesson. Victory is not measured by what you take from others, but by what you reclaim for yourself. The humiliation, the betrayal, the public toast, all had been fuel. Fuel for focus, for strategy, for rediscovering my own power. I began mentoring women in business. I shared lessons about visibility, self-worth, and the quiet strategies that allow someone to survive and thrive even when overshadowed by those who underestimate them. They called me a visionary, though all I did was step back into the person I had always been. Daniel's empire. It was intact, but the foundation had shifted. He no longer commanded unquestioned authority. He realized, perhaps too late, that partnerships are strongest when respect is mutual, when contributions are acknowledged, and when underestimating someone carries consequences. I no longer carried resentment, I carried clarity. I no longer sought revenge, I sought excellence. And the woman who had been publicly humiliated at her own birthday had become someone no one could ignore. Years later, when I walked past the venue of that birthday party, I didn't flinch. I smiled quietly, remembering the toast that had ended him in my mind long before I took control. The memory was no longer pain, it was perspective. Every milestone, every promotion, every acknowledgement was sweeter because it was earned, quietly, without spectacle. I had learned that power is patience. Strength is strategy, and dignity is invincible when you refuse to give it away. I lit candles on my next birthday alone, savoring the simplicity, the quiet victory, and the knowledge that I was finally free to define myself on my own terms. The woman Daniel tried to erase had returned, fully, boldly, and with unwavering self-respect.